I am Santita Jackson, coming to you from WCPT, the largest talk radio station, AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I want to hear your voices today. Call me or text me at 773-763-9278, 773-763. If you want to text me, GWC Injury Lawyers gives you the opportunity to do that, but I want to hear your voices today. We're going to be talking about what's happening in Louisiana. They are expected to be to not have power for maybe 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Can you imagine? This is a major American city, everybody. And they're seeing alligators course up and down the streets because, there was a flood, not in much of New Orleans, but their power is out. Their main transmitter is sitting in the Mississippi River. And remember, our infrastructure system is about 120 years old. So we're dealing with the 19th century, really, because that's the end of the 1800s. We're dealing with a 19th century infrastructure system in a 21st century world. Wow. What is that? And what the public health implications? We're going to be talking with Dr. Shanina Knighton and Dr. Deborah Verholden, who's back. Grandma is back. Grandma is back. Going to be talking with her. And then we have Matthew Ho, the former Marine officer who was assigned to the State Department. That is as high as you can go, everybody. And he resigned because of the Obama administration's, which was an ongoing policy in Afghanistan. And so we want to hear what he thinks about this, and of course John Nichols. But I'm really glad that they're going to be with us today to really break this down. I want to know what you think about this. I mean, the last person, they left a day early, 11:59 p.m. on August 30th. Wow. And then, of course, hits New Orleans and hits that Gulf region. I mean, on the same day as Hurricane Katrina. You can't make this stuff up. So please meet my morning stars over on the Santita Jackson and Friends page on Facebook and WCPT 820. And I want you to meet me on Instagram at Santita J. And please go to my Instagram, Santita Jackson IG. Dave Dowling, Linear Bob out on the left coast. You know I love that. Carol Soskin out on the left coast, and Linda and Andre here in Chicago. And Shirley from beautiful Philadelphia. Everybody like and share. Laura, Linda, everybody like and share. Please like and share. Like and share, like and share. That's right, Dave Dowling. You know, New Orleans did not flood, but you know what happened in New Orleans just very, very quickly because Pastor Stephen Thurston and I went down there for a right to return rally the year after. Reverend Jackson led it. Bill Cosby was there, and Roberta Flack and John Legend. A lot of people came down to support this right to return march. Well, there was a barge outside of the wall, which abutted the levee leading to the lower Ninth Ward. They knew that the hurricane was coming, and this company never moved the barge. So the barge knocked on the standing wall as long as the hurricane was in force. And then finally it broke the standing wall. That is what happened. How about that? How about that? So it's just the things that you find out. So let's talk about Afghanistan. What does this mean? What does this mean? And how will this change how America is viewed in the world? How will this change how America is viewed in the world? Because our European allies needed the United States to stay. We're the policemen of the world, and America said, no, we got to get out because, the Taliban told us we had to go. So let me get a couple of these headlines out of the way so that we can get to some good news and get some great information for you today on how you can prevent infections and dealing with COVID-19 and welcoming our new grandma back, the grandma of India. That's right, Dr. Deborah Verholden. Chicago will have a high of 80 degrees today, mostly sunny. Minneapolis, St. Paul will have a high of 80 degrees. It will also be mostly sunny. The Dow went down 55 points yesterday. The Nasdaq was up 136 points. The S&P 500 was up 19 points. The Cubs will be playing the Twins today. The Twins were triumphant over the Tigers yesterday, 3-2, and the White Sox will be playing the Pirates today. Well, everybody. On my orders, according to the president, a little more than an hour ago, this was last night, the United States military began strikes against al-Qaeda, terrorist training camps, and military installations of the Taliban regime in Afghanistan. Now, that was from 2001. That started this whole occupation of Afghanistan. And it's 20 years to the day, 7,267 days, according to this Axios report, nearly 20 years. We have ended that occupation. We've ended that war. Army Major General Chris Donahue was the last man to leave. So, what do you think about that, everybody? Was it all worth it? The toll: 2,461 U.S. service members killed, 20,000 injured. Many of those injuries are catastrophic. 3,846 U.S. contractors killed, 66,000 Afghan military and police killed, 47,245 Afghan citizens killed, 51,191 Taliban and opposition fighters killed. That's a lot of people, and $2 trillion. What do you think about that, everybody? That $2 trillion, we could use it in the Gulf right now. What do you think? Oh, wow. The Washington announcement of this withdrawal, of the final withdrawal, came at 5:30 p.m. yesterday with General Frank McKenzie making the announcement. Every single U.S. service member, he announced, is now out of Afghanistan. I say that with 100% certainty. What do you think about that? We're going to be talking about that today. It seems that more and more people will be getting the shots. That's right, the vaccine hesitancy, according to this Axios report, in the United States is showing signs of crumbling. Why? The biggest driver appears to be the rise of employer mandates. Fewer adults now than ever say they want to take the shot. 1 in 3 unvaccinated Americans in the survey said that the FDA approval would make them more likely to take the vaccine. But that means 2 in 3 still won't. Interesting. But 43% said their boss requiring vaccinations would make them more likely to do so, up from 33% just a month ago. There is a survey that says that the percentage of Republicans who trust national news organizations has been cut in half over the past 5 years. Now, what's interesting is that they would politicize that in this way because we have found that media mistrust by all Americans has hit a new low, according to this study that came out just a few months ago. Faith in society, central institutions, according to this Axios report, this synopsis rather, especially in government and media, is the glue that holds society together. By the numbers, everybody, for the first time ever, and this is this year, everybody. Fewer than half of all Americans have trust in traditional media, according to annual barometer shared exclusively with Axios. Trust in social media has hit an all-time low of 27%. 56% of Americans agree with the statement. Thus, quote, journalists and reporters are purposely trying to mislead people by saying things they knew are false or gross exaggerations. Wow. I think we need to talk about that one day. Why it is, how media mistrust impacts us all. So let me go to you, Pastor Stephen Thurston, teaching pastor at Salem Baptist Church, the House of Hope. I know Pastor Kimberly Ray and her sisters, the Holy Ghost family, will be out there in just a few days. Can't wait to see you all out there. Pastor.
How are you, Santita?
It's great hearing your voice.
Connect with you.
Always a joy.
Yes, ma'am. Listen, I want to talk today about reputation repair. I was counseling a young man the other day who had had some tragedy in his past growing up, seemed to be on the right path, doing some amazing things, and he slipped up and made a mistake that could really damage his future possibilities and potentials. We're going to fight for him, that things will work out for him, and pray for him. But I want to talk today because somebody else may be in this same space. We've often heard it said that it can take a lifetime to build a reputation, but an instant to destroy it. And maybe it was just a one-time event or a result of chronic behavior. Regardless of the context, once your reputation takes a hit, it can be incredibly challenging to repair it. Bad reputation can ruin relationships, cost you professional and personal opportunities, and even erode your self-confidence. That's the bad news. But we're here to talk about some good news. And the good news is that you can successfully change others' opinions of you. Developing a plan of action, remaining disciplined and intentional, and following through on what you said you do are some of the key elements. Let me give us 5 steps that one should take and move through if they find themselves in a space and place in life where there's some damage that's been done to their reputation, but they want to turn life around. Number 1, you've got to be apologetic. Apologies that are sincere. They really do go a long way. And there's 6 things that apology should be comprised of, because a lot of people really don't know how to apologize. Number 1, you got to express regret. Number 2, explain what went wrong. Number 3, acknowledge responsibility. It's not the time to rationalize or become defensive. Number 4, declare repentance. Number 5, offer repair. You got to outline what you're going to do to make it right. And then number 6, request forgiveness. That's number 1 as it relates to being apologetic. The second thing you've got to do is to be patient. If people have experienced you one way for a period of time, then recognize that it's going to take a minute for them to see you in a brand new way. So don't get discouraged in your efforts and decide, hey, I'm going to quit. They're not recognizing the energy I'm putting into becoming a better me. Give them time to observe your behavior to know that it's authentic and real. You've got to stay consistent and you've got to stay committed. Number 3, be direct. Share your developmental goals with other people. Communicate what you're planning to do in your efforts to get better, because sharing your goals encourages others to be on the lookout for the changes that are taking place in you and in your behavior. And you want to be in a position where you can get feedback from them, those people that are impacted by you, to learn more about how they are experiencing you in life. Number 4, be consistent. When you want others to perceive you differently, consistency is critical because of something called confirmation bias. I know it's a big word, but I'm going to break it down. It really deals with the fact that people are more likely to notice behaviors that confirm what they believe than those that conflict with what they believe. And so your consistency will help to change the mental model and the mental picture that they have of you. Number 5, and finally, be sincere. If you desire to improve your reputation, your goal really shouldn't be just to change other people's perceptions of you, but to adjust your underlying character so that it's not just smoke and mirrors. There's really no way of shortcutting your way to a better reputation. You can't pretend to have change because people are real good at recognizing fake when they see it. So as you move forward in your transformation, stop reading and listening to all the bad press about you. Ignore the comment section in your life about the bad things that you've done. Shift your attention to planning out your future self. What kind of person do you want to become? How do you want people to view you, and why? If you remain mired in the regret of your past actions, you're going to miss out on the opportunities to build your body of good work. It's time to repair some reputations. You've been given the tools today. Go do it and become the best version of yourself.
I love it. I love it. I love it. We can always have a fresh start, can't we, Pastor?
That's it. Hit that reset button.
I think that the world is in the midst of that right now. We have an opportunity to really create the world as it ought to be, recreate it.
Yes.
Really? Don't you think?
We do. I actually preached about that this past Sunday. Changing how we see things.
Yes. Absolutely. Amen to that. I like that. I like that. I like that. As we bring on Doctors Knighton, that's right. We're welcoming back home our beloved Dr. Deborah Fur Holden, who is now a glamour. India has been born. Before I bring them up, or as I bring them up, Ken, you've called in right early this morning. How you doing, Ken?
Good morning, Santita.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. A long-time listener, first-time caller.
Thank you for calling.
Can I make a couple comments?
Of course.
Okay. I do believe, first of all, I hope your mom and dad are doing well.
They are doing well. I just saw someone on the chat line who said that my father's home. That's not true. We release a statement every day. He's not home, but he is. He has been moved into the rehabilitation facility at Northwestern University Hospital, but they are resting comfortably and improving. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, and I do believe if your dad was feeling better and in his prime, he'd be able to go over to Afghanistan and negotiate with the Taliban. They would respect him because he's a religious man. He's not a politician. He's not a military man. He can get the rest of the people and the rest of the Afghans out. I do believe your dad would be able to do that.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. But, I think that one of the things that he knows how to do is talk to people and relate to them respectfully. I think that's part of the problem that we have here, part of the challenge. We don't respect each other's personhood. We don't respect each other's sovereignty. And that gets us into a lot of trouble. We treat the rest of the world, well, at least we treat much of the world, if not most, like they're with people. And that's not a good thing, Ken.
Yeah. Yeah, following your dad for so many years, I believe he could do it.
Oh, bless your
If
heart.
he was in better health, of course.
Bless your heart. Well, he's going to keep on going until he gets out of here. I tell you that.
Yeah.
So just keep him in your prayers.
Santita?
Yes.
Yeah. Two questions, Santita.
Mm-hmm.
What were so many American civilians doing over there?
Now, that is an interesting question. You know what? Wait for Matthew Ho at the time. Think about that.
Now, I know there's Doctors Without Borders. There's religious people who take care of the kids. Were all these military contractors, Santita?
Military contractors, and you have corporations that are over there. When you get to you would be surprised at the reach of these global corporations when you go into, New York City is not the largest city in the world. You have a lot of cities of a million plus people all around the world. I mean, Sao Paulo has between 15, 18, and 20 million people. Mexico City has about 30 million people, as does Tokyo. I mean, you go to places and you will see our corporations, American corporations, that is, ensconced in these places, and they're doing business, and then our government has to cover them, right?
And these companies are bringing their families into a battle zone?
No, actually, you have pockets of wealth in these places. So you have, like, the Lisa Halaby, who became Queen Noor of Jordan. Her father was the head of Pan Am, and she was Arab American, and she is Arab American, beautiful woman. And she had overseas, an understanding of overseas, although she was an American, because she lived in many places. And you don't live in poverty when when you're going with your parents, or when you are really doing a big job over there. You live well. But we're seeing, I think we're beginning to see the corporatocracy, right?
Right.
And what our military is sent in to do, we're sent in to oftentimes cover or take care of protect the interest of corporations.
And one more question, Santita.
Sure.
Pakistan is right next door.
Mm-hmm.
How come they didn't send them over to Pakistan? They're right next door.
You're asking a lot of questions. Ken, you are asking so many questions. I am not that sharp. Much. You know what? We're going to ask Matthew Ho.
I listen to you because you are.
I do. You are very sweet.
There's a lot of questions. It's like, and we don't even talk about the South Yemen and Ethiopia with the starvation. We don't even mention that anymore.
Well, and it's interesting. Some people are starving there, but others are not. The people tend to be are getting starved out, but the corporations go in there and they make so much money. And a lot of that's being revealed, and it's not right. That's why the Taliban said, "You know what?
No.
Enough." I'm not saying that they are 100% right, but we have disagreements with our own political leadership, so I'm not going to get in that.
I know.
I'm not.
Right.
That's their business.
I'll say one more thing, and I'll hang up.
Uh-huh.
I say Santita Jackson for mayor.
Oh, no. I thought you liked me, Ken.
I do love your voice.
Too. I thought you loved me, Ken. You don't want to put that on me. Oh no. Oh.
And don't forget the song. It's a thin line between you know what.
Well, you know what? I think it's an honor to be able to serve people, but I think that in life, you need to know where you fit, right? And
Yeah.
that is not something that I would be inclined to do. I'm honored whenever anyone asks me about serving the public in this way, but I think
Sure.
serving people in this way is, and in other ways other than politics. I think that's where I belong.
Right. You're right. Exactly.
Okay.
I'll take you any way you want.
Oh, bless your heart. I'm sending you today. Thank you for calling in. I'm so glad you felt moved to call in.
And I'll call back again, Santita.
I want you to keep listening. You know what? If you can,
Okay.
try to get in with Matthew Ho, because he has a lot of information about how and why we are over there. Indeed, it prompted him to
There's so many
resign.
unanswered questions.
Oh, well, there are so many, but we need to keep on digging. I don't think that the last troop out should be the end of our questioning of why we were there for nearly 20 years, almost 20 years to the day. We've been over there. We've lost a lot
Yeah.
of lives. Hundreds of thousands of people have had their lives. They've lost their lives and they've been disrupted. We need to talk about that. We really,
And
really do.
certain companies made billions of dollars
Mhm.
off of weapons. That's for another show.
Well, that's true. Well, I've been talking about that. They made trillions, and our government paid for it. How about that?
Trillions.
Yeah, that's right.
Trillions.
That's what happened. So,
Trillions.
and they need trillions in the Gulf right now. New Orleans will be they will not have power for almost 3 weeks. Think about the food that people will lose. Think about that.
Exactly.
Think about the medicine. Think about the ventilators. Think about the things, CPAP machines that people need from day to day. Ken, I hope that you are in good health and please stay well. And thank you for all of your good wishes. I just sending you much love for being so sweet to me today. Thank you. Blessings to you, Jacqueline Williams Thomas, checking in from the left cover at 4 a.m. Good morning, girl. God bless you. Stay right here. Let's welcome back Dr. Deborah Holden. She is now a grandma. India is here. Dr. Shanita Knighton joins us as well. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a few minutes. Postmate, great job. I need you to bring me down. I'm a little hot because I'm clicking in the mic, okay?
Okay, yeah. I brought you down a little more, so hopefully that
Okay.
helps.
Okay, you all let me know how it's sounding, okay? And can you bring up doctors for Holden and Knighton?
Already up.
Okay.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
If you only knew, I wake up this morning and India slept all night, which never happens because she's just so little and she's breastfed. So, they want to eat often. And right when it's time for you guys to call, she wakes up and starts to cry. I said, "Oh no, honey, Grandma gotta go on the radio." So I pick her up. We put her. I go to change her, swaddle her, and she has drifted right back off to sleep. So I'm sitting in the recliner with my little pea pod in my arms.
Right now?
Yeah.
Well, you know what,
Yeah,
Joyce
radio
Anderson.
ready.
Well, look, Joyce Anderson said she's our first baby morning star. So there you go.
Yes.
We've been waiting.
Yes, I love it. I love it.
We have been
She
waiting.
is so sweet. So sweet. I can't even stand it. I find myself just staring at her and
Bless
just
your
trying to
heart.
take in all of her sweetness.
Bless your heart. And you all look just alike. You, your daughter, and your sweetest thing. Oh my goodness, it's just sweet. Oh, okay. Casey's calling from the South Side. Okay. Hold on, Casey. But you know what, Dr. Deborah Holden, I've got Dr. Knighton there. I didn't know you were going to be back. so soon because of, you remember you said you're taking a week off, but that's all right. We're good because, we've been waiting for you. Everybody's wanted to know, was she born? How's she doing? I made the announcement. Well, when is Deborah coming back? Dr. Deb, what? But you know what's bothering me, and I wanted to speak with you and Dr. Knighton about this. You, of course, can look at the policy because, well, I'm going to send you another article about a civil rights claim that's being filed about COVID-19 and our children and access. So that's something else. But I'm looking at Louisiana, Dr. Deborah Furholden. Dr. Furholden, that is like it is just beyond my comprehension, Dr. Furholden and Dr. Knighton, that a major American city could be without power for 3 weeks, and what that means. I mean, particularly in Louisiana, as hot and humid as it is, this is the hottest time of year. And you've got all this standing water. And so when we're fighting about infrastructure, when one of the main transformer, I think, for New Orleans is in the Mississippi River, Dr. Verhoeven, they have a real mess down there. Is this the doctor's first grandchild?
This is my first grandchild, and it is the most precious experience ever. This is the first.
Oh.
Yes, Joyce. So if Joyce is a grandma, she understands.
Oh, bless your heart. Bless your heart.
Yes.
Bless your heart. Bless your heart. Bless your heart. Bless your heart.
35 seconds.
Okay. And Mark said you sound like you're glowing. He said it makes him want to have a baby too, but their children are on their way to college, so I think he wants them. But you know what? It doesn't matter when they get here, because once the children get here, my father said you might fight about the babies before they get here, but then you fight over them once they arrive.
10 seconds.
Yeah.
You never want to let them out your sight. Just stand by, everybody. Dr. Knighton, you there?
I am. Change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Welcome back. Santita Jackson, it's a joy to be with you on WCPT, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. And of course, my morning stars over here on the Santita Jackson and Friends page on Facebook and on WCPT 820 on Facebook. And guess what? On Instagram. Santita Jackson IG, on Twitter at Santita J. All right, everybody. The moment we've all been waiting for. We've been waiting, it seems like, for a year, but it actually has only been a few months. That's right. Dr. Knighton, we've got to welcome back our beloved Dr. Dr. Deborah Furholden. She is a grandma for the first time, and she is holding little India as she is doing the show today. So we can't get loud. We can't get excited. Okay? Hold your excitement, everybody. Because we don't want to wake this baby up. How you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. I really am. This is like witnessing a miracle. I saw her come in the world, and I'm just more and more just in love with her each day that passes. I literally take little videos, and my daughter does too, and I've been sending them around to people. Our health officer is under fire. She issued a mask mandate for K through 6. She had a death threat made against her life and her deputy's life. I texted her just to say, "You're okay. You'll be okay." She said, "I need some joy in my life. Can you send me an India picture?"
Oh.
I sent her a video of India dreaming. She looked like she was dreaming, and she was having a smile reflex. And she said, "This has brightened my whole day." About 2 hours later, she texts me again, "I can't stop watching the video." So, babies bring joy. And I'm reminded, as we look at Ida and COVID and all the different things that are happening and all the deaths that we've had from COVID, life is still going on. New life
Mm-hmm.
is being brought into the world.
Mm-hmm.
People are transitioning. Everything's still happening. So I'm just really grateful to have this opportunity to be reminded to stop and find joy in all things, because there's a lot of joy that's possible and available even in these turbulent times.
Absolutely. And when you look at these children, they make you want to fight for a better world. They make you want to clean the air, to make sure that we have drinkable water, not just drinkable water, but, they make you want to make the world what it's supposed to be. That's what it is. And
Yeah.
everyone is just so happy for you today because she has the blessing of being with three generations. And don't ever take any of this for granted. I have to tell you, my parents are nearly 80 years of age. And it's a blessing to be able to speak of them in the present tense. And it's a blessing for Dr. Verholden, her children, and the grandbaby to be together. Please, please, please take pictures and do not take any of that for granted because it's a blessing. I think of my grandparents who are now my ancestors with such fondness. And if I could just ask them one question, just get one more hug, I promise you, right today I would. I would. But we got callers in, but before I even get to them, and before I get to Dr. Knighton, Dr. Verholden, when you hear that a major American city, because you're in the public health space as an epidemiologist, your passion is equity. We know that when they ask people to make these mass evacuations, the average person can't do that, Dr. Verholden. You don't have the money. Most people don't have enough money to make an emergency room visit. You don't have $400 or $2,000. Go where? I mean, there's no place for you to go. And so that's an equity issue. But to see people who did stay behind, they've got to stay in places and homes that might not be flooded. But in New Orleans, they might not have electricity for 3 weeks. That doesn't seem safe to me, Dr. Verholden. No air conditioning. I mean, your food can go bad. I mean, wow. What do you make of that? I mean, in the United States today.
Well, if you look, right, and I live in Flint, Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm standing in what happens when you don't have the infrastructure that would allow you to be prepared for natural or man-made disasters. What happened in Flint was a man-made disaster, but our aging and outdated water infrastructure, this if the same exact thing had happened in a city where the water infrastructure was updated, and we tried to advocate for that in Flint years before, up to 10 years, starting 10 years before the Flint water crisis, it would have gone very different. I don't know if people, some people say, oh, they put lead in the water. No, they didn't put lead in the water. Lead leached from old pipes. Mm. And New Orleans has a very, very outdated and old water infrastructure themselves. I went to New Orleans a lot since I've been here in Flint. I did a fair amount of work with them in their School of Public Health. And I was surprised to find out how often they're on a boil water advisory, how just truly outdated their infrastructure is. That doesn't just include their water infrastructure. It also includes their electricity infrastructure. And so there's a business case to be made for the preparedness and for the investment in the public health infrastructure, because the impact of residents being without electricity for weeks and weeks is going to be catastrophic for many. And from a public health perspective, it's going to give rise to potentially more public health problems. All that sitting water, all that heat, that's related to a whole lot of pestilence and mosquitoes and other things. So there's a real business case here to be made for preparedness and for updating that public health infrastructure. And people always say, well, where's the money going to come from? We don't have the money. But here's the reality. If you don't spend it and don't make those investments, it's going to cost you either way. They're going to end up paying. But the problem is they'll end up spending a lot of money but it won't solve the problem. It'll just be some temporary solutions and fixes. So they're sort of being bled over time, paying to respond to these disasters instead of just figuring it out and making the investments. This probably needs a 20-year plan, but they need to upgrade their electricity and that whole system, and their whole water infrastructure needs to be upgraded.
Dr. Knighton.
In the absence of that, we're going to pay.
Yeah. They are. It's really unsettling. I mean, because many of us don't realize how close we are to that, because America's infrastructure is in poor shape because it is so old. We got a 19th century infrastructure. It was built at the end of the 19th century for a 21st century world. That is not going to work. And we're begging when the American Society of Civil Engineers tells us we need tens of trillions of dollars just to catch up. Dr. Knighton, when you see Dr. Deborah Holden just talked about standing water, we know that it is very hot, it's very humid, and New Orleans is below sea level. So, I mean, they don't even bury people in the ground. They bury you on top of the ground in New Orleans. When you think of this issue, how could you, if you had to talk to someone who has no place to go but their home, okay, with no electricity, what would you tell them to do? How could they, I guess, try to prevent infections? I don't even know where to begin with that. But like
it is tough.
It's big.
Yeah, because the thing is, it's like if we're talking about preparing or even thinking about, like, let's say resources that people would want to start putting together, like right now, one of the things that I would assess, like, let's say when something like this first happens, especially when we're looking at summer months, our summer month kit might look a little bit different than what our winter month kit might look like. But one would be making sure we got coolers, right? And so understanding that, like, we're not going to be able to preserve all of the food, but even making sure that you have coolers. So that way, at least, let's say that the pack of chicken that's frozen in the freezer, that can help to keep some other things cold, you know? So there's things like that where you would want to be able to put food together so that way it can stay cold as long as possible. The other thing is, and I'll always emphasize this to people, is making sure that you have an inventory of batteries. And so it's almost as if going out to get soap and toilet paper. Like, batteries are absolutely essential. They can be used, let's say, to plug up portable lighting devices, portable battery devices. There's even fans that function with batteries. And so batteries are one of the first essential things to be able to have. Many people also don't think about this too, but you know the chafing dishes, like the cooking sets that you would have at the cookout?
Yes.
You don't have to have like one of the, fancy metal ones, the ones that you would have to go out and, have a fancy dinner in, but even having like the disposable ones that you would use at a picnic, and making sure that you actually have like that chafing oil is a way for you to be able to warm up food. It's a way for you to be able to cook food if you need to. So it's a cheap way to be able to do that and to have stuff like that on hand. So I would absolutely recommend that someone would have those, because that's the way to be able to cook as well as the way to have food. And just to eat, a cheap way to be able to do it. And I'm not saying cheap in regards to everyone can afford it, but these are common items that people have either encountered that they don't think about that could be used during a time of crises like this. The other thing, and I was talking to you, Santita, about this, is when we're thinking about drinking water, there are emergency and what I would call essential items that you would have even for drinking water. So there are things that exist such as life straws, where you literally could suck the water up from one end of the straw, and by the time it makes it to your lips, it's purified and safe enough in order for you to be able to drink it. So something like that would also be important. Somebody would ask, like, well, why would I think about colloidal silver? I'm not saying this from a medical standpoint. I'm saying it because it is a vitamin. But having things like that to be able to boost your immune system in times where there is a possibility, with like New Orleans, they're around, let's say, standing water. And so if animals get into that water, it can be contaminated. If people get into that water, it can contaminate it. Food getting into that water can contaminate it. And so typically these are things that lead to infections. It was crazy because I want to say it was Hurricane Andrew some years back where you had individuals that survived the actual hurricane itself, but having to walk and touch, the water, having scars and stuff, they ended up with flesh-eating disease and either ended up dying or losing limbs. So it's important, too, for you to just kind of make sure of cuts and bruises and things like that when you are around standing water or water that cannot be cleaned. Right now, of course, even having some sort of emergency mechanism for family members that may be close by. So have a plan in place. If you are, let's say, within a mile of some family members and the power goes out, have you all come up with some sort of emergency preparedness plan of where you know that you will meet in the time of crises? Do you know what resources that you're responsible for bringing? Do you know what resources they're responsible for bringing? Because this is typically how people survive, and how our ancestors have had to survive. The coolers, I mentioned having a cooler for the food, but there may be certain medications that may need to be cooled down. It's important to be able to store those in there as well. When it comes to, let's say, food, I know that this is things far reaching, but even thinking about like food dehydrators, they make them, some of them you can plug in, and there are mechanisms that have batteries that have plug-in apparatuses. So that means that the actual machine itself, you put batteries into, and then the machine allows you to be able to plug things into it. And so you would be able to utilize some of these things to be able to assist you with being able to keep fruits and vegetables, meat, and sometimes even herbs safe. And don't get me wrong, like some of these things will not last indefinitely, but it can help prolong your food.
Doctor.
And I'm bringing.
Yeah, so no, please continue.
And I was only saying, and I'm bringing these things up. You heard that I haven't mentioned a generator yet. Like there's certain things that I haven't brought up because I understand that not everybody has access to those things. But when you talk about matches, lighters, we talking about, Schaefer burning oil. When we talking about a grill, when we talking about charcoal, sometimes we gotta think about the things that we have access to. The battery packs that you plug your phone into, having a small satellite radio. These are items like, let's say, if it's items that, not to say like, hey, people might have the money to go out and get everything all at once, but it's items that you should start thinking about and checking off on your list to make sure that you're updating on a regular basis. Because just as if, or just like what's happening right now in New Orleans, we have to remember that we were just in a situation not too long ago where there was a gas shortage. We had places where, there was no electricity. We didn't have a chicken shortage. We got a car shortage with microchip production, lumber shortage at times, housing shortages at times, labor shortages at times. And, there's inflated and rising costs. And so it's like when we're starting to think about some of these things that are happening, whether it is a California fire or Louisiana flood, we have to make sure that we have essential items to be able to make it through these tough times, because we also know, too, whether we believe in the concept of global warming or not, we know that our environment is changing, and we have to be able to survive that and encounter that.
Dr. Verholden, in terms of policy, in terms of just, if you are faced with this kind of catastrophe, I don't know any other way to describe it, what should you do? Are there resources that government will provide? We know about the Red Cross, but what do you do? And because now you've got a newborn to feed. heaven forbid, I certainly wouldn't want that to happen to you, but you've been in Flint, where water is still not something you ought to drink there. What should we be doing? I mean, it doesn't this make the infrastructure fight very real for all of us?
Well, it does, and then people need to really seize the moment because, like with Flint, for example, the very last bit of legislation that President Obama signed was called the WIN Act. It was the last piece of legislation that he signed, the Water Infrastructure and Improvement for the Nation Act. That provided several $100 million to improve water infrastructure in cities all across the country. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So the WIN Act that President Obama signed into law as his last bill put a lot of resources on the table for states and cities to deal with their water infrastructure. It's important that states seize those opportunities and to also understand a lot of these infrastructures. What happened is they were built for cities that were a different size. They were built for cities that weren't as developed and industrialized as the cities that we have now. They were built at a time when we didn't have the knowledge that we have. Do you know there was a time in Flint by city charter, the pipes were made of lead? Because at the time, lead pipes were the best thing that we had, and we didn't quite understand the impact of lead on human development and the brain and the body and all these other things. The guy that invented unleaded gas died of lead poisoning.
Oh my gosh!
I'm sorry, leaded gas.
Mm-hmm.
Leaded gas. Died of lead. He was a big lead advocate, because at the time lead was the best that we had. It was this great metal. It was easy to get. It was, soft enough to easily be made into things, but hard enough to be durable. And by charter, our water infrastructure was lead pipes. Once we realized how that lead was this really potent neurotoxin, we started to change things out. But it was for many cities that have changed out their whole water infrastructure. They had a 20 or 30-year plan. But you got to think, when you're making a 20 or 30-year plan for a city, that is not about any particular person. It's not about the person holding a political office. It's about understanding, integrating public health with good public policy and doing what's needed and making those investments over time. And most of the people that did a full replacement did it over 20 years, and they did a 5% annual replacement. And it required strong leaders to come in every year and not take that money and reallocate it for other things. See, people don't see and feel and experience the greatness of having an upgraded water system. Mm-hmm. It's not one of these, things that people immediately will know. Quite the contrary. As you're replacing water infrastructure, what happens is you get a lot of disruption to services.
Well, hold on.
Their yards dug up. Yeah.
Well, hold that thought, because I was listening to a woman in New Orleans today who said that, it's not that they don't have any water. The water's at a trickle. I only have about 3 minutes left here. Would you trust the water that's coming through the system now? I mean, given the fact that water has to be filtrated, cleaned, all of that, would you?
Oh, no. Like I said, New Orleans has had water problems for a long, long time. Their system is basically a lot of patchwork. Their water infrastructure is a whole lot of patchwork. And again, the whole thing needs to be redone. But that's going to require a long-term plan. This is something that needs to be built into the city charter. It needs to be ratified. It needs to be put in a way that whoever comes in will have to honor this, because it needs to happen. If not, they'll be in a constant state like they are now of trying to deal with these disasters after the fact and making a lot of having a lot of back end spending, but never really getting those needed upfront investments that are going to solve these problems for the long haul.
Let me bring on Ashley King from...
It's not just water. Yeah.
Oh, no, this is a mess. But just very quickly, I just wanted to hear from him. Ashley, what's on your mind? Is Ashley there?
He's on.
Okay, Ashley. Calling once. Calling twice. Oh, hey, Ashley, I need you. I need you, sweetie. I only have about a minute and a half, but it belongs to you. Ashley? Well, you know what?
Can you
Listen.
hear me?
Now I can. I got it. Go on, Ashley.
All right.
All right, sweetie.
I never thought I'd be calling into a municipal finance show on your show, but that's what we're talking about. And luckily in Chicago, you have a couple of minority firms, Loop Capital and Seabird Shank, William Shanks, who specialize in this particular aspect because you're absolutely right. A lot of Black municipalities have a lot of infrastructure problems, like New Orleans. And when you look at it, these like the pandemic, it's like every once in 100 years, and certain things take a long time. There's a tool called a Century Note where municipalities and other institutions can borrow debt for 100 years. And that might be a tool that we need to look at because interest rates are at historical low right now. And you can borrow the money, do what you need to do, and fix up your city at low interest rates and spread out for a long period of time. And these Black municipal professionals at these Black companies have really good solutions that could help us. And I wish you would, maybe bring some of them on.
I'll reach out.
Back, however you want to do it.
Ashley, I will reach out because I think this, you know what? If we're all New Orleans today. This could happen to anybody. You can wake up because we have like rolling brownouts, blackouts, in Chicago all the time. And one morning I awakened and there was no power. I was stuck. It threw me, really, really, really threw me off. So I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going on? What's going on? Called my mom and she said, oh, no, your father and I have been without power because my brothers, my sister and I all live in the same neighborhood, same general area. And she said, we've been out of power for a few hours. Don't worry about it. But I had to get to work. So it was like, oh my gosh, but I've got to bathe something. Fortunately,
30 seconds.
The power came back up. But I said, wow, what if this had happened? No, we can talk during the break, but what if this had happened what if this lasted for weeks? Think about that. That's why,
had your brothers working at those firms on Wall Street.
Well, that was Jonathan. That was Jonathan. That was Jonathan. And he did it only for a short time. But, we're going to talk more about that. But stay right there. We're going to be talking with Matthew Ho about Afghanistan. That's right. It is. We are now out of there. But some Americans are left behind. Why were they over there in the first place? Why were they left behind? The last troops are out, though. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a minute.
Hi, liberal loan
lender.
I'm
sorry. I tried to bring you on before we went to break.
That's okay. That's cool. That's all right.
Thank you for calling in.
Municipal finance is important to our community.
Well, you sound like you know something about it. Is that your area?
I worked at Daniels and Bill.
Okay. Oh, that's what Travis Bell's firm. When he was in college.
And Willie Daniels.
That's right. When he was in college, yeah.
When they split, I went with Willie. But,
okay.
We still all work together. Yeah, we all there. And Chris Williams. And,
yes.
And Suzanne Chase. And Jim Reynolds. All of us always work together to try to help our community. All right. We might be at different firms, but we always work together. And your father was one of the unifying factors.
Well, yeah, because he was also trying to help you all. He was trying to help you all get business.
And Maynard Jackson, the Maynard Jackson model.
That's right.
You're not Black, don't come to the door. And Mayor Berry in D.C.
Oh my gosh. Mayor Berry, Maynard Jackson, Coleman Young. And they all worked with and Reverend Jackson. That's what they did. Because you can have all the qualifications in the world. You can be as smart as you can be, but you won't get the business unless you have an advocate. Boom. And you need someone like a Marion Barry, a Maynard Jackson, a Coleman Young in office who cast down the gauntlet and who say, we're going to make this fair. Because as we're seeing in Afghanistan, you see the power of a government contract and you see the power of our military because our government contracts are enforced by our military, but the government contracts are get private benefits from our corporations. We need to be clear on that. And I'll let you know, let Dr. Jackson and Dr. Deborah Holden go, but I want Dr. Deborah Holden to say something to our audience about India before you do leave because we're bringing up Matthew Ho. Please say something about the baby. Dr. Deb? Is Dr. Deb still there?
Sorry, I went on mute.
I know.
I was on mute.
I know. I'm speaking softly because I don't want to awaken the baby, but we're so happy for you. We're so happy for you. We're just glad that we've got our first Morning Star baby, grandbaby. How about that?
Oh, I'm gonna have to put pictures up in the chat in the morning.
Thank you.
I've literally been holding her the whole time.
Well, see, I didn't put the pictures sent me in because I was like, I didn't get permission, but.
Oh, you can totally put them up. She's so adorable.
She is preciousness.
I need a picture.
Honey, and all that pink.
You hold on tight.
Oh, you are going to fall in love. She is just a little bundle of joy. Whew.
I'm so excited. Like, that has to be amazing. I have to live vicariously through grandmothers because I just be sitting up there it's like it's the energy that goes through them and it takes you back to how you felt about your grandma,
Oh, man. Oh, boy. And then you can understand, I don't know that experience, but I guess you can understand the wonder. I with my great grandmother and my grandmothers. I had that blessing. Wow. And that's amazing. Ooh, it's amazing. And the fact that she saw her daughter give birth, well, it's enough to make me start weeping. But there you go. And Effie says, congratulations, Doctor, for holding everybody, sending you so much love today. D. Ray said, oh, Dr. Deb on the scene holding the baby. How about that? But do we have Matthew Ho on?
Yeah, he's on.
Matthew Ho, you were having a grandbaby moment. Our just in residence just became a grandma. A grandma.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
No, thank you. So I reach out to you. Will you call me, Dr. Deb? Okay.
Okay.
Okay, and you let me know what we're going to be talking about. But giving you because we were like, she is in grandma heaven. We haven't heard her voice. She is not thinking about us old people anymore. We love you, Dr. Deb.
All right, it's just Mr. Ho.
Okay. Mr. Ho?
Good morning. How are things in Chicago?
Oh, I think it's going to be a little cooler today, less muggy. And I can tell everyone you because you've been so sweet. And thank you, which is on my Twitter feed. Thank you for being so sweet about my father and my family yesterday. That was so sweet of you. Bless your heart. But boy, Twitter's enough.
I hope they're doing better.
They are. We've been so blessed. We've been so blessed. And so, I just saw a rumor that my father is home. That's not true, everybody. No. He's not home. And so he and my mother both still in the hospital. And there you have it. But they are they are steadily
30 seconds.
improving. And we've been so blessed. So blessed. Whew, so just keep us in your prayers, though. All this is a day-to-day thing. That's what can I tell you? It's a day-to-day
15
thing.
seconds.
Okay. Thank you, Coach May.
Win the Water Cooler Wars, weekdays 11 to 2, right here on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. Yes, we can. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Let's do that. I'm Santita Jackson. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show on WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I want you to call me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. I want to hear your voices today. If you want to text me, please go to 773-763-9278, that same number. GWC Injury Lawyers gives you the opportunity to do that. But I want to hear your voices today. I want to know what you think about Afghanistan. We are officially out of there. What do you think about that? How will this all play itself out over time? Of course, I want to hear your voices. 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. $2 trillion. Oh boy, more than 2,400 American servicemen and women killed, more than 20,000 injured, and hundreds of thousands of the Afghan people were killed. Wow, there's a lot, and much of their country blown up. So let's talk about that today. We want to talk about that, what all of this means, what all of this means. We're going to be talking with Matthew Ho, of course. This is one of my heroes, indeed. Such a courageous man. He was a Marine captain who resigned from his position at the U.S. State Department, objecting to the escalation of our conflict with and our occupation of Afghanistan. More than 10 years ago, I think it was in 2009. We're going to be talking with him. John Nichols is going to join him at the bottom of the hour, but we want to talk with Matthew Ho about all of this. So let's get a few of these headlines out the way, everybody. Chicago will have a high of 80 degrees, mostly sunny. Minneapolis, St. Paul, a high of 80 degrees, mostly sunny. The Dow closed down 55 points yesterday. The NASDAQ closed up 136 points. The S&P 500 closed up 19 points. The Cubs will be facing off against the Twins today. The Twins were triumphant over the Tigers yesterday, 3-2. And the White Sox will be playing the Pirates today, everybody. 11:59 Kabul time, 11:59 p.m. The last soldier was out of Afghanistan. You saw Army Major General Chris Donahue walking onto the plane, coordinating the evacuation. What do you think about that, everybody? October 7th, 2001, 7,267 days ago, nearly 20 years, President George W. Bush announced the invasion in the aftermath of 9/11. He said, and I quote, "We will not waver, we will not tire, we will not falter, and we will not fail. Peace and freedom will prevail." Wonder how true that was, everybody. The toll, 2,461 U.S. service members killed, 20,000 injured, 3,846 U.S. contractors killed, 66,000 Afghan military and police killed, 47,245 Afghan civilians killed, 51,191 Taliban and opposition fighters killed. The tab, $2 trillion. What do you think about that? Call me, 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. In the meantime, we have got the lights off in New Orleans, food spoiling, gas pumps out of order. New Orleans is facing an extended power failure. Indeed, reports say that the city could be without electricity for up to 3 weeks. At least one person has said at least two, everybody. What do you think about that? 3 weeks, one of the major American cities without power. Indeed, our infrastructure is more than 100 years old. We're dealing with a 19th century infrastructure in a 21st century world. Much of the main transformer for New Orleans is in the Mississippi River. Think about that, everybody. Think about that. Let's get to Let's get to 20 years, almost 20 years later. Here we are. Did we win? Did we win? Who won? Who lost? You tell me what you think about all this. Matthew Ho, you stepped out on a limb, but you made a courageous decision. You said we're making a wrong decision about Afghanistan. What did you see in 2009 that so many people did not see? What made you resign from your position at the State Department?
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for having me back on, Santita. So in 2009, I did resign my position with the State Department over the escalation of the Afghan war by the Obama administration. It came after my being involved with the Iraq war. I've been to the Iraq war twice, and I had also worked for most of the last 7 years or so on issues of the wars and operations with the wars and policy with the wars, et cetera. And what I saw in Afghanistan was fundamentally no different than what I saw with the Iraq war. It was it was basically the United States military occupying a country in an attempt at military victory for reasons that really had nothing to do at all with the people of Afghanistan, just the same as have been, you could say, for Iraq. I saw a corrupt government, a predatory government. It was a government of Afghanistan composed of warlords and drug lords that was not democratic. It was not supportive of women. It was actually the opposite. It was oppressive. It was not in favor of human rights. It was, again, the opposite. It was a human rights violator, a systemic human rights violator. And these are all things that were supported by the United States through the death of young Americans and the killing of Afghans. And so after 5 months, again, seeing that this war is no fundamentally different than the Iraq war, having been through a mental and spiritual crises over my own participation in that war, I was intellectually and morally broken, and so I resigned in protest as the Obama administration was escalating the war in Afghanistan. It just quite simply, it's very obvious that it would not work. Even though the United States is the wealthiest country in the world, incredibly strong, the United States has nearly infinite resources compared to other nations. Even with all that said, the war could not be won. At best, it could just be continued in a status quo of killing and suffering that could go on forever, for which no purposes would be achieved to anyone other than the profiting of weapons companies, as well as the profiting of individuals and government institutions that benefited from the war. So again, resigned, and here we are 12 years later. And at this point, which is a very there's no celebration about this. The end of this war for the American military in Afghanistan, certainly not the end of the war for the Afghan people, but the end of the war for the American military. There's no cause for celebration. There's only anger and sadness. Anger and sadness over what has occurred, what didn't need to occur, and anger and sadness over the very real possibility of what may still occur. I do want to make one more point. You asked me, what did I see that others didn't see? Mm-hmm. And many other people saw the same things I did, but chose to go along with the war. We could be here all morning. I could tell you all the different people I work with, my colleagues, people senior to me, people in, throughout the U.S. government and military who agreed with me, journalists who agreed with me, but then reported the opposite. There was a vast conspiracy of malfeasance to continue this war that can only be understood as people gained personally and institutions gained as institutions. Just to kind of make it clear to folks, what I'm talking about in terms of support. So when I did resign, and after about 5 or 6 weeks after I resigned, I called the Washington Post, and there's a whole backstory to that, how that happened, but it was very, very Forrest Gump-like. Let me just tell you that. There was no real serious machinations or public relations plan on my part. It kind of just unfolded. And but anyway, I ended up calling the Washington Post, and my whole thought when I called the Washington Post at the end of October in 2009 was I just wanted to write an opinion piece, just write an op-ed saying this is why I resigned from the war, and and then leave it at that. And just because I felt that the understanding of the war that I had and so many others had was not being reflected in the conversation about the war. And if people remember back in the fall of 2009, there was a lot of conversation about the Afghan war, very big debate, very big discussion. I don't know how much of it was this debate as much as it was people lecturing basically how we need to escalate the war, continue the war, et cetera. But I guess we could call it a debate. But that was the reason why I called the Post, was because I said, I wanted to offer my opinion on this, and I wanted to just write, a 700-800 word op-ed piece. And the Post did call me back, but it was one of their associate editors who called back, Karen DeYoung, and very prominent foreign policy reporter at the Washington Post, and she ended up writing a 3,000-word biopic on me, basically, that was on front page above the fold, and an enormous story in the terms of just what it generated, the media attention it generated. And so I asked Karen why she wrote this big piece on me. Why did you do this? You could have just put me on like page, 7 or 8 like that, or it could have just been, 6 or 7 paragraphs rather than, basically, 2.5 pages long or whatever it came out to be. And she said, the reason why is because when I asked everyone I knew at the White House, the State Department, the CIA, the Pentagon, et cetera, about your resignations and your reasons for it, nobody disagreed with you. So the idea that people did understand the war was failing, was going to fail, was, as well as it was immoral, corrupt, criminal, was done for purposes that could not be articulated in any way that would justify a benefit to the American people or to the Afghan people. I think it was best, but people just continued to go along with it. And that was my experiences, and still remain the experience to this day of people agreeing with the basic thesis or conceit of what I was saying about the wars, which can be applied to all the wars the United States is currently in, from the west coast of Africa through all the way to Pakistan. People continue to go along with them.
But hold on, we don't have these wars in Europe or New Zealand or in Australia.
Absolutely. There is a very. And I'll retweet this piece so people can find it easily if they'd like. And if I don't, please somebody reach out to me on Twitter and remind me to do it. But I wrote a piece recently, and I've written other places where there is a very real degree of racism that underlines these wars. A lot of it's got to do with the extraction of resources and and the taking from these countries, and that's been a consistent thing in particularly the Muslim world for centuries now by the West. So what we're seeing by the United States in these wars in the Muslim world, which according to what we can understand from the Department of Defense, these wars are taking place in at least 15 countries, again, that span from the west coast of Africa to the Middle East. And you're exactly right, Santita. You do not see this type of violence directed against people of a lighter skin color. You just do not, and you never would expect to see it. So there is a lot that goes into these wars that a lot of people want to just say these wars are about the extraction of resources, the economic aspects, and certainly that is involved but it's my belief that the main purposes for these wars are domestic political purposes, and to some degree that it, involves a good degree of racism in their executions, in their underlying reasons, and in their sustainment.
Wow. You know what? Let me go to a couple of callers. I have a lot of questions for you today. Whether it's time with us. Howard from Los Angeles. Howard, what's on your mind?
Oh, thank you for taking my call.
Of course.
This is a good exposition. Talked about one thing I heard about Afghanistan. Seems like we should learn something from Vietnam. We were there 10 years, and
hold on, Howard. Howard, you sound a little muffled.
Yes.
I want to be able to hear you clearly.
Oh. Okay, is that better?
That's better. Much better. It's okay. It's much better.
Okay. Well, I was going to say that we were in Vietnam for 10 years, and I think what happened in Vietnam was that we saw the war every day on television, and broadcast. You remember Ed Bradley was there, he got shot and things, and we had the draft on, so there was different things that made that come back. Us getting down there quicker because the public got so tired of it, and the demonstrations and the anti-draft movement, all that going at the same time. And this war was different in the sense that we didn't see the body bags coming back, and we didn't see the war up close in front and person like we did in Vietnam. That is why it went 20 years. And also, you got to consider the fact that Russia was there 10 years. And the interesting thing about Russia is there was the Soviet Socialist republics. Southern Russia is Muslim. So those people identify more or less with the people in Afghanistan they were fighting against President Moscow. You remember that Chechen thing? They had a bombing in a theater or something like that. I know nothing about Chechnya, but those people were fighting against the Russians all the time. They conquered them, and they had to get up out of there. Then Russia had a serious drug problem. Their troops was coming back struck out on heroin. The poppy fields was right there, so they had to go know where to get those things. So it was the Afghanistan. Well, we should learn something from Vietnam. And you just can't go around there and push your weight on people. And also, Eisenhower had that thing about what his speech was, the military-industrial complex. And what did the average American get from that? Nothing, a few jobs here and there. But America's GNP really is making bombs now. We don't make nothing here.
Well, you know, it's very...
down.
Howard, stay right there, because, I think that he's picking up on something, Matthew. Because when President Eisenhower warned us about the dangers of the encroachment of the military-industrial complex on, as he said, on our American experience, he talked about the spiritual impact as well. I was struck by that. He just said it's not just material. We'll have this will change us. This will change who we are. How have all of these wars, these trillions of dollars of wars, how have they changed who we are? I mean, Howard makes the point. Vietnam was on television. Now, we missed that. But it's interesting that we also missed Afghanistan because we didn't see it. So when you talk about these hundreds of thousands of people who had killed on their side, that's not even mentioned. We talk about 2,400 plus servicemen and women, and that's important, 20,000 plus injured, and then the 3,000 plus injured contractors. But we don't talk about the Afghan people. We don't talk about that. How does that work, Matthew? How can we call that just?
Well, it's not just, not at all. And Harold made some really excellent points, and thanks for calling in, Harold, because what you're describing there is that there is a through line through American wars. And this goes back, centuries. The United States has been involved in these kinds of wars for forever. The United States begins as an empire in the making, an expansion westward that was for territorial acquisition so that we could harvest the land via slave labor, right? And to do that, we committed genocide against the American Indians. We created and kept this just brutal slave system that we utilized to build wealth for ourselves, right? And then after the United States reaches the West Coast, literally within years of the last Native American tribe being subjugated in the 1890s. Within years, the United States is involved in taking over Hawaii. The United States is involved in the Spanish-American War and the conquest of of Cuba and the Philippines, and in many of those cases, particularly in the Philippines, you have insurgencies that last for more than a decade, incredibly bloody insurgencies where the United States is incredibly brutal. I mean, so the history of this is not, and there's plenty more, Santita, as folks listening, know, we could be here all day just talking about those episodes. But through all that is a very immoral and criminal through line that if the one thing that the United States government has learned, because you hear this a lot, why didn't the United States learn from Vietnam? Why didn't the United States learn from Iraq? Why didn't the United States learn from Afghanistan? The United States government has learned. And what they are doing is, in some ways you could see it where with the Iraq and Afghan wars, the way that the wars were done were different in many ways than the Vietnam War. But not so different, as to really need to get into, right now. But because the important thing is the way these wars have evolved, and it gets to Harold's point about hiding these wars. And so these wars have been reconstructed over the last decade, really since the second half of President Obama's administration, to be wars that are hidden from the American public, and by extension, then wars that the American Congress don't really care about. And that the American media doesn't pay any attention to, because if it's not young Americans being killed and bleeding, then it's not going to get the attention. And so what has occurred, again, in these wars that stretch from the west coast of Africa all the way to Pakistan, and if people are interested further in the details of that, I urge them to go to the Cost of War project at Brown, the Watson Institute Cost of War project at Brown University, or the work of Nick Turse, Turse. Look at some of Nick's work on Africa, and you will see very clearly that the United States is involved in these wars, but they are involved in these wars in a way that makes them unknown.
50 seconds.
Secret wars, or that these wars seem as if they are wars that the United States is only tangentially involved in, or that we're just trying to help out. We're just trying to beat back a jihadist a takeover of the country, and we're just helping out because we're good guys, which is, which is completely right? It's completely upside down. But, however, so what's happened?
Well, no, hold that thought. I want you to finish it. Hold that thought, because I want you to clarify that on the other side of the break. Because I had to stifle a giggle as I thought about American troops running down the streets of Sydney, Australia. I said it'll never happen.
Exactly.
This is about Afghanistan and where all of this is. I mean, there's a headline in the Washington Post: for Biden, a forever war isn't over, just entering a new perilous phase. What could that be? More of the Santita Jackson Show. Joining Matthew Ho will be John Nichols in just a few minutes. You almost made me giggle.
Program every here on W.
It was the irony. I thought about us being deployed in Melbourne and Sydney, and seeing us jog down the streets. I said that would never happen, Matthew. I mean, like ever. This is so crazy. And we laughed, Matthew. I mean, these people said, "Get out." I mean, like, get out, and they meant it.
Yeah, and two things. So we did deploy to Australia in the 1940s during the Second World War. The United States Marine Corps had a huge presence there, and that was to help defend Australia against the Japanese. Against this is the way it was described at the time. Not me saying this, but as it was described, the yellow Asiatic hordes.
Absolutely.
Right? That's who we were defending Australia against. Right? That's
so they could be safe in that part of the world, right?
That's right. We were saving, I mean, and the thing about the Second World War in the Pacific was, as long as the Japanese were just killing Chinese and Koreans,
Don Nichols is on.
there was not a real concern in the United States to be involved. The United States was involved in many different ways, and we had alliances over there. But in order, the thought of the United States going to war to fight the Japanese on behalf of the Chinese or the Koreans was just not really something that was ever seriously discussed. But however, when the Japanese start threatening the colonial possessions and start taking over the colonial possessions of the British, the French, the Dutch, and then start threatening the American colonial possessions, well, then the whole situation changes, and war becomes basically imminent at that point between the U.S. and the Japanese.
Well, I mean, the Japanese are our friends now, but we still have a particular sort of animus toward Germans because of what they did with the Holocaust. And I get it. But you know what? We didn't drop any bombs on Germany. We dropped bombs on the Japanese. Now you can say they dropped 2 bombs on the Japanese when we didn't have to. It is racist. And
exactly.
That's all it is.
Yeah.
I mean, oh, please go on.
I was going to say we firebombed the Germans just as we firebombed the Japanese. Not to the extent, though. And you can make arguments about it, but the what we did to the Japanese in terms of the bombing, not just the nuclear bomb, but the conventional bombings, the fire bombings. I mean, the fire bombings destroyed and killed, many, many more people than the nuclear bombs did. And by the time the United States had dropped the nuclear bombs, the United States had destroyed, I believe it was more than 90 Japanese cities by firebombing. Destroyed them. I mean, when I say destroyed, I mean destroyed, right? I mean, gone. These cities are gone.
But the nucular fallout. The nuclear fallout was not there. Well. Right? I mean, when I went, one of my earliest trips to Japan, I was struck by the fact, this is back in the 80s, that, people were wearing masks. And if you so much as sneezed as you went through the airport in Tokyo, they would put you on a plane and send you back to the United States because their immune systems have been so depressed by what they experience. Yeah. I mean, it's awful. It's awful. And war is awful. It is. And now we need all those troops back here because they need to rebuild New Orleans and the Gulf. Oh my gosh. You can't make this stuff up.
Right?
You can't make it up.
No. Talk about, we were saying this the other night, I mean, some things are very,
going on.
I mean, talk about eerie, the fact that.
Change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey everybody, I'm Santita Jackson. It's a joy to be with you today as we are looking at the end of our involvement in Afghanistan. But is it over? Is it over? Indeed, there's a headline in the Washington Post today. For Biden, the forever war isn't over, just entering a new perilous phase. What does that mean? We're talking with Matthew Ho, former Marine officer who was stationed at the State Department. He resigned his position in protest of the escalation of our involvement in Afghanistan by the Obama administration. There are 4 American presidents who have overseen this, but President Biden, who had been a hero of the American media, ended it. And now he is being excoriated. He is being just shredded. And there's nothing he can do that's right. Now, is it because he ended the war? What if he continued it? Would he still be a hero? It's just something to think about. Call me 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. You're joined by John Nichols, of course, the national correspondent for, I was about to say Rainbow Push, but this is, Matthew Ho. I met John when, we were working on Reverend's campaign together back in 1983 when we were both kids. So there's that. So that was a Freudian slip. But we've been talking about Afghanistan, and I got a lot of callers, a lot of people who want to weigh in. But Matthew, just given your experience, given the fact that you are a veteran, you have been in the military, and I mean, you joined it for the loftiest of reasons, and then you were assigned to the State Department. Anyone who understands Washington culture has to know that he was at the apex of his profession. It just doesn't get any better than that. And so for you to put it all on the line and just say, you know what, this is not enough, it's not right. I'm still trying to get inside of your head, Matthew, because that's a big deal. Because in Washington, you would have been quite alone and you would have been isolated and then you would have been shunted. Why did you do that? Why did you resign? I know I've asked you that before, but I think it bears discussing. We're on WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Call me at 773-763-9278. If the lines are busy, continue to call because you all are calling in. Matthew, why'd you do that?
Well, I mean, again, it goes back to the comments that Howard called in and made, and that you amplified, Santita, about the spiritual aspects. As you noted, Eisenhower referenced the spiritual when he made his military-industrial complex speech. We recall that Martin Luther King. When Martin Luther King spoke against the Vietnam War, to paraphrase him, he talked about the spiritual death of a nation whose military expenditures exceed that of their social expenditures, right? Yes. A nation that focuses more on killing than on taking care of its people, is in a death spiral, to paraphrase him.
He said that.
And that's how, on an individual level, I was as well. Taking part in these wars, the continual need for me to rationalize these wars, the continual need for me to make excuses to take part, how those rationalizations and excuses, year by year would be undone, and I'd have to manufacture a new one. To go back, I was a senior in high school in 1990, 1991. During the first Iraq War. And at that point, I had applied to West Point, and I had also applied for an Army ROTC scholarship. And I was horrified by what I saw in the Iraq War. Basically the war for oil, the slaughter of people for oil, and that kept me from going to West Point. That kept me from accepting an ROTC scholarship. And I never thought about the military until I was out of college and working for a year and a half already, and basically bored. And thought about doing some other things, but thought that maybe the Marine Corps would be a good thing for me in the sense of letting me take part in world events and the big hand movement of history, and being of service and testing myself, right, and putting myself into positions where I would be challenged or have to be responsible. And I think I was just allowing. I had a dual nature to myself, and I think most people are familiar with this idea of duality. It expresses itself in many different ways, and mine was wanting to be somebody important, wanting to be a hero, wanting to be take part again in the making of history, and the other side was a very, very moral, spiritual side, and those two sides fought throughout the wars. As I continued my participation in them, again, I'd have to make up new excuses or reasons to do so. And so by the time I got to the Afghan war, I was broken, again, morally and intellectually, and I just kept lying to myself. And I think one of the important things I've come to realize is that before I went to the Afghan war, particularly after my second time to Iraq, I was drinking extremely heavily as a form of medication. And that use of alcohol was meant to basically keep down that intellectual and moral honesty I had, that guilt over taking part in these wars. And so when I got to Afghanistan in April of 2009, and, I couldn't drink over there, that allowed that intellectual and moral honesty, as well as that guilt, to basically spring like, wildflowers or weeds in my mind, because it wasn't being medicated or numbed by alcohol. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact why those thoughts and emotions, that moral and spiritual side of me, came to dominate and eventually won out and culminated in my resignation. But it took me, even after I resigned, though, Santita, there was a part of me that wanted to stay involved with the U.S. government, wanted to be a part of the establishment, wanted to be taken, put this in quotes, seriously, right? And so I hedged a lot in the first year or two of my public opposition to the war, because I had a part of me that thought, well, maybe I can go back in. Maybe I can go back in and help fix things and do things better. And, which was one of the major reasons for my continuance in the wars, was this idea of like, well, I can't do much about it now, but if I stay in when I'm a senior level person, I can make a difference, right? And so after I resigned, there was even still that within me that, that was still attached to this notion of being a part of something, taking part in something, this concept of service, I guess, basically. And it took, another year or two to finally rid myself of that, and to embrace the part of me that was morally and intellectually honest. And that came through, doing that was only possible because I came into contact with a lot of people in the anti-war and social justice movement who live lives that are intellectually more honest. And I realized these are the people I want to be with. These are the people that I want to become. These are actually the people who should be my role models. There was a long process and a lot of internal struggle, and much of it had to do, as you suggested, with the spiritual.
Oh, absolutely. And, I'm wondering, as we go to these callers, John Nichols, about a fair amount of revisionism that might be occurring as we speak, because the mainstream media, and they're not talking about this as a loss. We're withdrawing. We were beaten, and they told us we had to go. We couldn't stay another day. They said, get out. And the headline of your latest piece in The Nation is, if Liz Cheney is assigning blame for an epic failure in Afghanistan, if she's doing that, she can start with her father. Because I have a feeling we're going to try and turn this story around, because I know a lot of people want to weigh in today. But I want to know what you think about this way of and the mainstream media, John, they're allowing her to do it now.
Sure.
Every time I've been on a TV show, at some point I'm asked about my father and what he has and has not done. But they don't do that with Cheney and other.
You're exactly right. You're exactly right. And this is the interesting thing about this moment. There were people who were opposed to an open-ended entry into a war in Afghanistan in 2001 after the September 11th attacks. It wasn't that they were unconcerned about responding to those attacks. It was that they were clear-eyed about how best to do it. And one of them, Barbara Lee, voted against giving George W. Bush and Dick Cheney a blank check to fight a forever war, to fight multiple forever wars. And what's remarkable to me is that today, the people who said that Barbara Lee was wrong back then are on television, and Barbara Lee is very rarely on television. She'll get occasionally on a couple of MSNBC shows or something, but very uncommon. And Barbara Lee was not alone. At The Nation, we were writing about this issue in September of 2001 with clarity, with an understanding that if you went into Afghanistan with the purpose of nation building, with the purpose of making Afghanistan into something that would be acceptable to Wall Street or acceptable to Washington, you would fail. Just as Britain failed, just as the Soviet Union failed, just as other countries and other forces have failed throughout history. And this is not a hard thing to figure out, but I think it's very painful for our so-called experts in the media and for our so-called experts in Congress to acknowledge the reality that there were people that got this right from the start, who understood the reality from the start. And so instead of acknowledging that, what they do is they kind of pivot everything down into this moment, into right now. What happened yesterday? Can we get a picture of a chaotic scene at the airport? Can we report on a horrific and tragic attack? Can we talk to someone who is still trying to make arrangements to get out? Those are all appropriate stories. I don't want to not cover that, but I think they have to be put into perspective. And to be honest with you, the final thing I'll say is that this is one of the great tragedies, and Matthew Hill was talking about this. One of the great tragedies of our moment is we don't remember the clarity of Dwight Eisenhower's speeches about the military-industrial complex and his cross of gold speech, in which he talked about the immense cost of funding wars abroad and not funding domestic needs. Instead of having that broad perspective and that honest discourse about things, everything gets reduced to the politics of the moment. And Republicans in Congress, frankly, people like Liz Cheney, and Liz Cheney is, despite all the talk about her, being critical of Trump, she is a, all on board neoconservative Republican militarist, more so than many of her fellow Republicans.
And corporatist. This fight with Trump is personal. I mean, come on. They need to and we need to stop getting it, and we need to stop making it personal. These people were in a personal fight, and I'm out of that. Okay, I'm
exactly. People get lost in that, and so they somehow raise like a Liz Cheney up to a level of, oh, this is a noble person. She is not. She has cast the wrong vote on hundreds of issues versus the right vote on one or two. And I give her credit for when she gets something right. Of course, we always do, but we have to have clarity on this. And the tragedy of this is that at this moment, when Joe Biden took up a mess that was created by Dick Cheney and George W. Bush, that was made worse by successive presidents, that Donald Trump finally did say, well, okay, we're going to try and negotiate our way out of this thing, and then handed it all over to Biden. Biden looked at this situation, said, yeah, it's a mess, but what is needed here is a measure of clarity. We're going to set a date. We're going to stick to it. We're going to do the things that we need to do, and we're going to try as hard as we can to get everything else right. Now, not everything went right. It never does at the end of a war. But the people who are attacking Joe Biden now, after he has overseen a process that's gotten over 100,000 people out, that continues to work to get more people out, and that has ended a so-called forever war, at least for the moment, and understanding all the things that are said about how it could get projected into the future. Instead of saying, we finally got a president who had a sense of direction on this and at least tried his hardest to do what he said he would do and to do it with a measure of honor. It's just pure political attacks.
Well,
it has
also
nothing to do with Afghanistan. It has everything to do with domestic politics, and it's frankly pretty shameful.
And the people wanted us out. We lost. Okay. Bottom line, we lost. We said, can we have another day, another week? They said, no. You get out today. On August 31st, you need to be out of here. We need to be honest about that. We have not won anything, no war since the Second World War. We lost. And these little brown people put on our uniforms, used the stuff that we left behind, and won. They're winning. They are going to be they are cutting deals with the Chinese, with the Russians, and with people all over the world on their resources. We can quibble with all of that all we want to, but it happened. Let's get over it.
Well, and this is, and the thing is that this is you're kind of getting to the heart of the matter.
Yeah.
Instead of analyzing why things happened, which again requires you to go back and talk to the people who got it right a long time ago, right, and who've been right all along. Instead of analyzing why these things happen, I would argue that, however you want to define it, our military-industrial complex, those experts who keep showing up, keep getting it wrong, but come again to get it wrong once more, they want to maintain their ability to to be our default experts. They want to be able to say, the next time there is the prospect of a war, the next time there is a complicated situation, oh yeah, turn to me, I've got the answers. They have gotten it wrong again and again and again. And now they are using this moment to defend their right, quote unquote, to get it wrong again. And if we let them, I promise you, we will be in another war that will cost us, I would argue, as dearly or more dearly than the Afghanistan war.
I'm going to tell you this. No, we won't. Because look, these folks are not going to take it. The world has changed.
Well, they won't take it, but this country will keep making the same mistakes.
But I'm saying at some point Dr. King also said at some point some little nation whose name you don't even know will stop you in your hubris, in your foolishness. You know, a friend of mine, Reverend Donald Parsons, said even clouds run out of rain. You run out of time, John. You run out of time, and we're running out of time going into people's nations and stealing their stuff, killing their people, because no one expected these little folks in clothes we don't understand, not speaking English, with beards and mustaches. Oh no, not at all. Who said, no, all praise to Allah, get out of here, get out. And that is something that is very hard for the European mind, the American mind, to wrap themselves around. But you know what? You're going to have to do it. We are all going to have to do it. Whatever our persuasion, those of us who are on this side of the experiment, we got to let that go. And we just been losing them.
It's important to understand, though, that one of the things you said that was so important to take into perspective is that the world has changed, right?
Yeah.
The world is in constant evolution. And I've argued for a long time that when the United States launched the war in Iraq, now, the war in Afghanistan was one thing. It evolved into this much bigger nation-building project right around the time parallel to the launch of the war of Iraq, when suddenly the war in Afghanistan became, quote-unquote, the good war. But when we launched that, I guarantee you that China, policymakers in China said, great, you go do that. Because when the history of the 21st century is written, it will be a great big book about China's, incredible growth and incredible expansion as a country. And then there'll be a little footnote on that there used to be this country, this very powerful country called the United States, which, had immense resources, had immense military power, had, major respect around the world, all sorts of things like that, but squandered.
Dr. King said it. He said it 50 plus years ago. He already said that. And every time people try to tell Americans that, we don't want to listen. We lost Vietnam. Northern Korea has told, don't you even think about coming here. They're richer than the Taliban. Than Afghanistan. We need to stop it. Our minerals, our dirt, our oil, underneath other folks' sand. We need to stop and understand that these people who you don't quite understand, they're grown too. And guess what? God loves them too. How about that? It's their nation. Okay, they share a border with China. China hasn't closed their doors to their embassy. They're cutting deals. They're working it out. Russia hasn't done that. We've been kicked out. Let me just, we're about to go. I want you to stay with me just a little longer on the other side of the break. But Matthew Ho, I want you in these last 2 minutes to help us to make sense of this. And Miss Anita and everybody else, I promise you, we're going to just stay with me for a minute because I want to hear from you. Renee, you can call back, but Matthew, what are we looking at? Because I want to talk to some of these Gold Star families because I know. I was talking to a woman who represents some of them. She's part of that group. She said our suicide watchers are off the charts because people feel so disappointed. They feel so let down. Talk to me, Matthew. 2 minutes.
the conversation you and John just had laid it out really well and very quite clearly, the examination of why. And, even if the United States had been successful in these wars, right? Say we had won Iraq, we had won Afghanistan, we had won Syria. What was the reasons for? What would we have achieved? It was a colonial enterprise, right? It was an expansion of the empire. Right? I mean, so the moral failings permeate whether we win or lose. And I think that, getting back to John's point, that is something that, we need to go. We should be hearing from people like Barbara Lee. We should be hearing from, before the Iraq War began, the world's largest demonstrations were the millions and millions of people protesting against the war. What did these people understand? And I think they understood the underlying immorality and criminality of these enterprises, that what these things were basically, neo-colonial efforts, doesn't exactly look like what the British and the French and the Dutch did, centuries ago, but it is the same thing. And with regards, though, to your point about the disappointment, I think that's what a lot of it is, we know that combat veteran suicides, the suicides of men and women who have taken part in combat, we know they are fueled by what is called moral injury, by taking part in something that transgresses against your moral, spiritual, religious beliefs and values. And when you have an event like this that occurs where there's an ending, an abrupt ending, particularly since we heard nearly nothing about these wars for most of the last decade, and then all of a sudden this past month, it has been nonstop television coverage where in the preceding 6 years, the network nightly news had spent a total of 5 minutes apiece every year on the war in Afghanistan. I mean, think of that. From 2015 through 2020, ABC, CBS, and NBC nightly news, with 365 broadcasts a year, each spent on average less than 5 minutes a year talking about Afghanistan. Of course, this a year. So of course, to have this war now ever present on the television, of course, what does it mean? It brings back a lot to people. What makes people question what it was for, what the purposes were, and then I think the framing, as John, so articulated so well, that the framing of this war is all about the last few weeks, and it's all in a partisan lens. Who are we going to blame? And the contortions that people put themselves in to blame Biden but not Trump, to blame Trump but not Obama, to blame Obama but not Bush, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
I think that really puts really it really allows us to understand how destitute we are in our responsibilities in these wars as a public. How craven the media is with regards to it,
hold that
and
thought.
of course how profiteering the politicians are with regards to
Stay
it.
right there, because I want you to finish that on the other side of the break, everybody. We're having a little talk about Afghanistan. I mean, real talk. Right here on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. John Nichols, Matthew Ho, staying with me just for a couple more minutes. Dr. Shanina Knighton, and the new glamour, Dr. Deborah Furholden, sending you all much love, including Pastor Stephen Thurston. Thank you, Cosme Lozano. I'm Santita Jackson. Santita Jackson Show. See you in the morning, but stay right here on the Santita Jackson Friends and Friends page. Let's have a little talk right here. See you in the morning. Matthew, I am still on Facebook Live. Please complete your thought. And pardon me, John, for talking. Well, that's what I do. But, I am just so tired of us really not being honest. Look, Dr. King also said in one of his speeches, and he said it more than once. He said, your arrogance, as he was coming out against the Vietnam War, he said, your arrogance is going to get you into so much trouble, America. God will raise up a nation, and you won't even know its name, and it will take you all the way down. When I look at all of the monies, the trillions of dollars that will be required to just to rebuild the infrastructure of New Orleans, their main transformer is in the Mississippi River right now. It was knocked down. God just blew a breath. Storms. And New Orleans is going to be out of power for 3 weeks. How many people are going to die behind that? And then we don't have enough money for infrastructure. Think about that. This is the hardest swamp in the United States. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable. These people, think about grandma and grandpa who need breathing machines at home, who need CPAP machines. Sitting water? The reason I was reading a wonderful story about Disney World, the reason they don't have mosquito problems in Florida is because they don't have sitting water on that campus. Nowhere do they have sitting water, okay, in Disney World. That's how they resolved the mosquito problem. That is not going to be the case in New Orleans and in the Gulf. It is going to be dangerous. And we're spending all of this money making Northrop Grumman rich, Raytheon rich. I mean, really? You ought to be tired of that, everybody. And then we don't have enough money to give every child, every young person a computer. I mean, and I don't mean some little teeny-weeny computer. I mean a real computer that really works. You mean to tell me you can't give everybody access to the United States? Really? Oh. We will deserve to be way behind if we don't get our behinds in gear and change our priorities. This is wrong. These little brown people, these little black people, these poor white folks, okay? People who you would go past, they're human beings just like you. And they deserve a right to the tree of life. They have a right, and you have no right to stand in front of it. And we need to really check ourselves on that. And make it lost. Be gracious about it and keep on going. Build your own country. Nation building, please. Nation theft. We need to build our own country, John and Matthew. We have a quality infrastructure. The American Society of Civil Engineers tells us that every 4 years. We can't get above a C minus. Driving across bridges that could fall at any moment. Hello, remember Minnesota just a few years ago? Oh, come on. We need to stop this, John. Matthew, this is wrong. This is crazy, and it's crazy. Making a few people rich. Okay, now. Just full.
No, don't do that. But keep talking.
No.
But with a little bit of wisdom at this point, we can get a lot of things right. And there's been very little attention to what I think is one of the better proposals of the moment. Because remember, we have to go on. We have to continue governing. We have to continue acting. We can't just kind of revisit the last few minutes, the last few weeks again and again and again. We have to look at the circumstance we are in. And so the reality of what's happening in New Orleans does drive home the absolute need for a massive domestic program. Bernie Sanders, to his credit, recognizes this. He went out to Republican states over the weekend to preach the gospel of the $3.5 trillion budget plan that Democrats have to expand Medicare, Medicaid, paid family medical leave, to do all sorts of things at home. And there are Republicans right now saying, we don't have the money for that. Well, of course we have the money for that. We have the money at massive levels because we can reduce what the military-industrial complex takes out of our domestic economy and bring a lot of that home. But I will say one quick final thing on this, and that is that we don't have to become isolationists. We can also participate in the world in a responsible way. And I wish there was more attention to Congressman Mark Pocan's proposal to take just 1% of the Pentagon budget and move it over to funding vaccinations around the world against the COVID crisis. And we have not done that. We have provided resources for other countries. The U.S. has not been a terrible player in this. We have not ramped it up to the level where you actually could get this under control. And so Pocan has said, just take 1% out of the military budget, and the United States can become the leading funder in the world of the response to COVID. We can make ourselves a heroic and useful country to people around the world, and we can do it right now. So the fact of the matter is that by shifting away from this passion for military interventions and for nation building and for all these things that haven't worked toward a much more rational set of priorities, we can get things right immediately. Now, I know that's romantic to suggest that.
No, it's not.
We can, in fact, get things right very, very quickly.
We could,
that's
but
what we ought to be focused on right now.
We should be, but guess what? President Biden has spent less than one 1/100th of 1% of funds that have been earmarked to defeat COVID. I just read that this morning.
Yeah.
On vaccine manufacturing, they've given the money to Merck. Now, all these companies, we already paid for the vaccine. We already paid the companies. They are already making money. Why do we need to give you more money to fix your factory? Why? We are into the enrichment of corporations. That's what I mean, John.
Yeah.
But at the same time, everything that I said is not in contravention of good governance. In fact, it supports it.
Mm-hmm.
We cannot afford wars. We cannot afford to earmark all of this money to make these vaccines. What about therapeutics? Because guess what? When you get COVID, both my parents are in the hospital today with COVID. The vaccine would not help them. They need therapeutics. There's a boy who died in Atlanta just a few days ago, who had been taken to the hospital twice by his parents, had a full scholarship to Morehouse to play football, had a bright future ahead of him. They wouldn't treat him, John and Matthew. They would not treat this child. When his parents took him to another hospital, it was too late to give him any therapeutics. He died right before his parents' eyes. I'm saying, look, our priorities are way off. They're way off, and we are not going to be blessed behaving like this. You're right. The Congressman's assertion, what he's saying is right. But we earmark the money, and then the monies go to the corporations. That has got to stop. That's all I'm saying. I mean, it's just like we have to pay attention to, because it's our money. I mean, I'm thinking about the people in New Orleans today, and I'm heartsick. I said, because that could be Chicago, where I am right now. It could be Detroit. It could be Itta Bena, Mississippi. It could be any place in the United States, the richest country on earth. Let you know how weak our infrastructure is, because it can't take a hit. It's the strongest country in 165 years, but our infrastructure cannot take a hit because it was built in the late 1800s. We're 21 years into the 21st century. That's crazy. Crazy. We're paying for it. We're paying for it. So, I mean, look. You all, I'm going to give you all. Anita, I'm sorry you held very quickly, Anita, before I get closing thoughts from my Anita, what's on your mind, sweetie?
Okay, what's on my mind is the parents of the people in Afghanistan that were in there. We need to have them on a show, on TV, something, Santita, and Jesse Jackson Jr. Now I know for sure why they got rid of my congressman, because he was for peace. And he had to go. And the corporations couldn't tell him what to do because he was for the people. And that's all I have to say about all of the trash that they got going on.
Well, I tell you, it's a sad thing that there was no room for you, Matthew, in the State Department and your assertion for peace. That speaks volumes. And we're not going to win that way. My grandmother Gertrude said, there is one way, the right way. She did say that, Matthew. She said that. And I think she was a deeply spiritual person, but, church, was something she believed in God. That having been said, church gave her problems because she saw a lot of hypocrisy and she could not tolerate that. And that was my grandmother Gertrude. And she would let you know that. But we've got to go another way. John Nichols, I want to give you some closing thoughts, and then I want Matthew to close us out. John, where do we go from here? Dr. King asked that question years ago.
No, it's still the right question. It always has been. And Matthew's been such a valuable resource in this conversation. I'm excited to hear what he has to say. Let me just offer a couple of quick thoughts. First and foremost, prayers up for your mother and your father.
Thank you.
Who have been on the right side of these issues all along and have carried forward so many of Dr. King's visionary statements as well as their own. And so I'm thinking about them a lot today. You know, all of these great power plays of the world, we must never lose sight of the people who have cared for us and loved us and been our comrades and allies along the way, and that maintaining a human focus matters. And so I begin there because I cherish your parents so greatly.
Thank you so much.
Well, and I know they're going to make it through. And as we kind of ramp up out of the personal into the political, I don't have a great final thought. Just a simple one, and that is that what's happening right now does not need to be a moment where America feels, less or harmed or in any way diminished. What this should be seen as is a moment where America can reflect. And in reflection, we learn things. We come to understand things better. And the truth of the matter is that if we pause and reflect, and I know it's hard, I understand everything you've said and other folks have said, but if we pause and reflect, what we will understand is that over the last 20 years, we have gotten an incredibly powerful lesson in the futility of running around the world trying to impose our will on other countries without their acceptance, without their desire. We need to fundamentally change our military policy, our broader foreign policy, that the United States is in fact a force for development and human growth around the world. And that is not a romantic notion. That is the reality of the 21st century. The desire of countries in Africa, in Southern Asia, in South America, Central America, countries around the world, is to have a better circumstance. And if we become a driving force in the fight against COVID, but also in the fight for human development, if we become a driving force to create that better circumstance, and if we work with the United Nations, not leading military endeavors on our own, but working with other countries and ceding some of that responsibility, we have the potential to come out of this as a stronger and greater and better country than we've ever been. That is within our reach. But what we desperately need to get there is to listen to people like Matthew and to listen to people like Barbara Lee and others who have had the courage and the vision in these difficult times, the courage and the vision to get things right. And so I think our challenge is not as immense as some people would tell us. It's actually a doable thing, but it is only doable if we pause to reflect on what brought us to this point and decide that we will never get here. We will never find ourselves in this position again.
I hope that we will learn, Matthew. I really, really hope that we will learn. Because so many of us thought that, well, we should be allowed to stay just a few more days. I said, do you understand what we have done in Afghanistan? Do you know what we've done to these people? No, we don't, because it was hidden. It was a hidden war. Matthew, what do you want us to have as a takeaway?
I want to go back to what John said a few minutes ago when he called himself a romantic for advocating for this this Mark Pocan plan to take 1% of the defense budget, which would be about $7 billion, $7.5 billion, and devote that to providing vaccines for the world. And John's not being a romantic. John is being a realist. John is being sensible. Yeah. The romantics are the ones who want to continue these wars. They're the romantics. They're the ones who have these fantasies, right, about war and about control and about empire and about American exceptionalism. Putting $7.5 billion into a vaccine program to help vaccinate the world would save hundreds of thousands of American lives. I mean, that is the most sensible thing to do. We know that the way these vaccines develop, they've developed, right? I mean, they continue to mutate, they continue to grow among unvaccinated populations, and now because there's so many unvaccinated populations, they grow within the vaccinated population. And just as we are dealing with the Delta variant right now, there already is another variant out there. We probably don't have it named yet or something like that, but we know that the Delta variant has been in existence for about 13 months now, at least. So there already is next year's Delta variant someplace. I mean, this is what we are dealing with this. So, and it doesn't just stop with the vaccine program. I mean, we know that to end world hunger, it would cost about $30 billion a year to end world hunger. Again, the Defense Department budget is $750 billion a year. The real military budget, the real war budget, when you add in the defense budget, you add in the Veterans budget, Homeland Security, State Department, Department of Energy, Nuclear Weapons, and the interest and debt payments on all our past wars and military spending, we're spending about $1.25 trillion a year on war in this country. So when you look at these and you say, man, we could end world hunger for $30 billion. Homelessness would cost between $40 and $50 billion to put an end to in this country. All the choices that we can make that would lead to not just a better quality of life for the American people and for the world, but a safer world. I mean, and we choose not to. And I think this comes back to what you were saying, Santita, is so much of what we have in this country has been captured by corporations. Look, most empires, when empires go abroad, they bring back that wealth and give some to the people. The United States did this for quite a while. Well, not all the people. The white population, benefited and got wealthy and rich off of the American empire, the expansion west. There are something like 40 million Americans who are still benefiting directly from the land grant programs, from the United States government taking land away from Native Americans and giving it to, so-called American settlers. There are about 40 million people in this country who are still benefiting from that. I mean, so the empire used to provide for the people, and again, really just the white population. But and at some point in the 1970s, that starts to change. After the Second World War, when the United States takes on the role as a global empire, fully embraces it, a man named George Kennan, who was a State Department officer, said, the United States has more than half the world's wealth and less than 5% of the world's population, and it will be the goal of every successive American presidency to ensure that inequality remains. But at some point, beginning in the 1970s and really coming into play in the 1980s, that wealth was not shared to the American population. And you've seen that now with the amount of money expended on these wars. The $2 trillion alone went to 5 defense companies. And what we know, though, is that over the last 20 years, as the war budgets have been absolutely obscene, trillions and trillions of dollars spent on the war, and even though as the United States grew in population from by almost 50 million people from 2000 until now, any spending by the federal government that is not related to the military or Homeland Security has either remained flat or actually declined. So, I mean, the trade-off has been very real. And so not only do we have an empire that crushes people and takes from them, but we have an empire that crushes people, takes from them, and then solely enriches the corporations as well as the politicians and all the other institutions that surround this. So the American empire is a unique one in the way it's structured, in the way it is a hidden empire in many ways. I think most Americans would recoil at the thought of it being called an empire. But look, the United States has between 800 and 1,000 military bases around the world. I don't know what else you call it other than an empire. But, I mean, to the point, though, where do we go is we have to start taking back our institutions. We have to start taking back the institutions that serve solely to enrich themselves. And we have to also start recognizing what we are. We have to start calling ourselves an empire. We have to start saying that, look, these projects in Iraq, in Afghanistan, throughout the Muslim world, are imperial projects. They are colonial projects. They are meant to extract and take from people, to enrich a few here in this country. Not that if we had extracted and taken and enriched many in this country, it'd be any better. But, mean, that's where we're at. We have a point now where we do have a marker in history. It's not the end of history. This is not the end of the Afghan war, especially for the Afghans. But it is a point, I think, where maybe an inflection can be made. But, it is very difficult because so much of what we are up against in trying to reprioritize how our government functions and for what purposes our government function have been captured. And it will be a very long, hard struggle to take it back, but we have to because, to John's point, to your point, Santita, we are killing ourselves. We are killing our own people. We are killing the world. Climate change, like as you're getting at, Santita, with regards to Hurricane Ida and what's happening in New Orleans. The climate crisis is happening now. And we are choosing not to do what we need to do about it. I believe the estimates are about $300 billion a year needs to be spent on the climate crisis. Mm-hmm. And under Joe Biden's climate plan, which is better than anything else before, mm-hmm. I believe it only comes out to about $65 billion a year the U.S. is going to be spending on the climate crisis. Again, compare that to the $1.25 trillion we are spending on war and war making and homeland security and all the other things. So it's how do we take back what theoretically belongs to the people, and how do we spend what wealth we have on taking care of one another as well as our brothers and sisters overseas?
Amen to that. I'm just saying, I just think we have to grow up in our politics and grow up in our ways of dealing with each other. We are an adolescent at most amongst nations. We're only 200 plus years old. But we've got to grow up, everybody. We have got to grow up. We have been too blessed to behave this way. And if you want a republic, and not a constitutional monarchy, but a constitutional republic, you're going to have to get involved. You're going to have to get involved. You have to get registered to vote. And if you can't get registered to vote, you need to ask why. If your name has been purged from the rolls, you need to ask why. And you need to fight for your vote. And then when you elect people, you need to make them accountable to you because they work for you. Stop kissing their rings and other things. Make them do what we need them to do. We all have a dog in this hunt. We all have skin in the game. Whatever your political persuasion is, I don't care if you're a Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, whatever. I don't care. Or you might be unaffiliated. I really don't care. There ought to be a common good that we all embrace. Equal access to equal high quality health care, housing, education. Right, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, that's what that's about. And our money should not be. Our founding fathers warned us about all these international interventions. They told us this is not going to work. They even told us about a two-party system, but that's another story. Thank you, George Washington. They've forewarned us. They saw all of this. And this is why we are in this pickle, in this mess right now. I pray for the people of New Orleans and anyone else who's been touched by Hurricane Ida. I can't even imagine being without. These folks are walking around in the dark. Well, today they have light, but all that food is going to waste. How will they eat? Who's going to feed them? What about the toilets? What about the sewage system? The little water that's trickling out of their faucets, they dare not drink it, and they better not bathe in it. It can't be cleaned properly. Think about that. All this money that we continue to put into these military contractors, we need this to build America. Nation building, build this one. That's all I'm asking. Build America. Not build back better, build it right this time. Build America. That's what we need to do. Build it so that we can all live and breathe free. How about that? Whew. John Nichols, thank you so much for all of the wonderful work that you do. You're a gem. Matthew Ho, thank you for all of the work that you do. Both of you for all of your service. You've served our country. You've served all of us in your own way. In your own way, and I thank you for that. I thank you for that. We're all grateful. We're all better because of all the work that you all do. And Coach May, thank you for another great show. Sending you much love. Yep. Sending all of my morning stars much love. Wow, wow, wow. Sending you, hey, now Carol, go on and take a nap. But I think she's up. She's out in LA. She's already up. Okay. So I love everybody. Like and share this broadcast. And if you want the podcast, go to WCPT820.com/Santita. I love you. Love you, love you, love you. And thank you for your prayers uh, uh, that you've given to my parents and to our family. They have been improving. God is good. But COVID is a day-to-day thing. It's a day-to-day thing. So just please lift them and everyone else who's struggling with this or something. Just let's pray for each other. How about that? Let's just do that for each other. Love you, Lorraine. Let's pray for Lorraine. Lorraine is taking care of her mom, and it is not easy. It's not. Let's pray for each other. Let's lift each other up. Let's lift each other up. Prayer, good thoughts. However you approach this thing, just do the right thing for the right reasons. Clean out your heart, clean out your mind, and let's get well together. Okay? I love everybody. See you tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show. Love you, love you, love you. Praying for the Williams family. I did not know that Lee Williams passed. You know, we love the Williams brothers. We love the Williams family. Love them, love them, love them. They've been with us for a long time. We've been together. And so I did not know about that. But I jump on off the phone and find out what's going on. Because I try not to share that kind of news with my dad, particularly right now. He and my mom, I don't want to give them any news that would be upsetting, and that certainly would be. But sending you much love, everybody. Sending you much, 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 much love and many, many blessings. Love you, love you. Love you guys.